So without further ado, without further delay, I'd like to introduce you all to Jonathan Orr. Jonathan, please just introduce yourself to the beautiful community in any way you feel appropriate, and definitely shout out kind of what you do with athletic transition services.
Yeah. Man, first of all, pleasure to be on here with you, AJ. Appreciate the opportunity to share and kick it with you. Um, so, yeah, I'm from Detroit, Michigan, born and raised. Recently, well, not recently, but about 8 years ago now, moved back to Michigan after a short stint in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife and I have been married, man, it'll be 15 years in May. And so,
Congratulations.
thank you. We have three awesome children, 12, 10, and 8. So two girls. Uh, they're 12 and 10. And then our son is 8. So Carson, Catherine, and Owen. And then as far as professionally, I lead a nonprofit organization called Athlete Transition Services. And I guess the most simplest way to say it is we exist to help athletes prepare for the transition into life after sports. And so we offer different programs and services to help athletes with that. But so, yeah, pleasure to be here.
All right. So you were a collegiate athlete in the space of football, and then played the game well enough to ascend to the highest level of it. How long? Where'd you go to college, and how long did you play in the league?
Yeah, man, I went to Wisconsin. Go Badgers on Wisconsin, and
Mm-hmm.
and then played in the league for a little over 2 years. So with the Tennessee Titans and then the Oakland Raiders.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So wonderful. Now, did you find in the league that there was a lot of preparation for the complexity of maleness, particularly at a level where fame is affiliated with that? Did they do much in the development space for you, or at least in your experience?
No, not in my experience. This is, gosh, 15 years ago now. Was my rookie year, and you know, like a lot of things, depending on where you end up, that tells a lot about the level of development you receive.
Mm-hmm.
Teams do it very well, some not as much. So no, I did not feel as though I had adequate preparation for that professional athlete life. And so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and even going from college, right? Like from
Mm-hmm.
college to like we didn't have an athlete development department like you guys have, and even
Okay.
and now they have it. It's 4 or 5 people dedicated to the overall growth and development of athletes, but back then we just didn't have it. So I was underprepared. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, yeah. It's similar. It just sort of hit and miss and how different programs are supporting that particular transition.
Yeah.
Dr. Wynn says, "Good luck, Jonathan, with those babies."
Thank you, Dr. Wynn. I appreciate it.
Yes, indeed. One of the reasons why I wanted to do this is because as I look back, there wasn't much structured development or preparation and what it means to be a man, right? Or let alone a husband, or let alone a father, right? Those are things that you sort of pick up anecdotally from different influences in your life. But at some point, inevitably, just like women think about the future and what that entails, men in our perhaps in inward self, we're not very outwardly spoken on some of these things, but at some point we probably think about, a future beyond our immediacy of whatever age we were. But around what stage in your life did you begin to think about the inevitability of becoming a father, or did you ever?
Man, you know what, AJ? I just shared this a couple weeks ago. I was talking to my wife about some things, and ever since I was a small kid, fatherhood had been on my mind. And it was kind of looking back on it, I guess it was kind of strange, but I can remember being 5, 6 years old, thinking about having a family one day. And so
Okay.
it was just something that I always, hoped for and thought about for as
Mm-hmm.
long as I can remember. So I knew, God willing, that I would have kids. I thought I was going to have more. I remember I used to say 1 at 5. Uh,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
kind of get up there close to you, but so
Mm-hmm.
man, it was just always a part of something that I just dreamed about, man, and wanted to experience
At a young age, huh?
at a young age, man.
Wow.
Young
Would you
age.
say that's common or rare? It seems like today's generation, they're not rushing to marriage. They're not rushing to parenthood, and it's a different generation. I don't know how old you are, but was it rare to be thinking about family at that age?
Yeah, I think so. Looking back on it, I mean, at the time I didn't know, and I'm 38. So at the time, I didn't know. It was just what was going on, along with other dreams, right? Like football dreams and I wanted to be in movies and all that stuff. So I had other dreams, but that was always one, man. And so looking back on it, it was rare, and just knowing, some of my peers that I grew up with, and most weren't really thinking about that back then. So
yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I'm asking the question, but I haven't even posed it to myself. I don't know when I really thought about fatherhood. Other than trying to avoid it as a young man,
right,
not wanting to have that prematurely.
Yeah.
Well, that's good for you, brother. If I may ask, was your pops around the house?
Yeah, yep. My dad was definitely around. My dad is my hero. So I know that played a lot, and had a lot to do with it. I heard Barack Obama say once that a father has the biggest influence on a life, right? And he said whether they're there or not. So he was just talking about his situation with his dad, even though he wasn't there most of his life, but that had a profound impact on him. So yeah, my relationship with my dad and having him around, being in the house, that definitely played a role in sort of my ideal of fatherhood. So.
That is profound. So according to the president, the father has the most impact upon a life, whether they're there or not, right?
Yep. Whether they're there or not. He said he had one. You might know this, Alonzo. He had one summer with his father in his life, and during that summer, his father introduced him to basketball and jazz. And to this day, those are like Barack is all about basketball and jazz. And it just showed him how powerful that short amount of time, the impact it had on him. But then it makes you think, like, okay, in his father's absence, then what else did he miss out on? Like, how did that impact him? And you never know. But so yeah, that always stuck with me when I heard Barack say that some years ago.
Yeah, it is profound. In a previous conversation, we had talked about single parenting, and we had made a statement that for young men to be the man they wish their father was, right? And that's a way of identifying the fact that clearly they do have influence. And as young people, we all got some assessment of our fathers, right? Whether good, bad, or indifferent. But sometimes fathers are deserving of critique, and sometimes it's just an age set that can find no good, in the old man, right? But as they think about their future and their inevitability of fatherhood as well, whether the father was there or not, all you can do is be the father you wish your father was, right? Whether that was deadbeat or highly present and overbearing, right? We certainly can reflect back on who they were, but ultimately we'll assume that the title of father, and then all we can do is be who we wish he was, right? Even in Barack's case, he's representative of a unique phenomenon, highly problematic, but we see a decline in marriage. However, we don't see decline in baby production, right? And so as a nation in the 21st century, we have a lot of children that are being born, often to disproportionately single parent families, particularly in our community, right? And that's why a conversation around fatherhood is so critical, right? Because whatever the marital or relationship realities are, then babies still got to be raised, right? So hats off to you, for decisions that you've made prior to marriage and during marriage to maintain that paternal presence. What's your thoughts on the whole? I think they said 68% of young children in our communities are born to single parent homes. Any thoughts there or reflections?
Man, just from personal relationships that I have with folks. I mean, in my family and friends, and it and hats off to single parents. I know a lot, and I'm sure you know a lot who have done a phenomenal job.
Mm-hmm.
But it definitely, and from what I can tell, creates parenting is challenging already, right?
Exactly.
When you doing it by your by yourself essentially, and some single parents have no help, right? Like no
Mm-hmm.
support from the other parent, and so man, that is rough, and ultimately it impacts the parent, um,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's just going to a lot of time trickle down to the kid in some way. And so I think about my wife. You know, her parents never married, but and then
Mm-hmm.
she was born, and for a while it was just her mom raising her and her brother,
Mm-hmm.
and her mom. A couple years ago, they was having a conversation, and so my wife sort of adopted her mom's sort of way of handling business, right? Because
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it brought, and I'm sorry, I'm getting off track a little bit, but
No, you good.
yeah, it carried over into our marriage. And my wife is strong and independent and
Mm-hmm.
can make stuff happen. And then it's like, we used to get into it, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, you don't need to do all of that. I can
Yeah.
handle this. And
Right.
so
Right.
she had a conversation with her mom, and then her mom told her something that was so good. She said, I was that way because I had to be.
Right.
Right? There was no other way. Like we could have survived and made it unless I was in that position, right? And so she told
Mm-hmm.
her, you don't have to mimic like the mother I was, the parent I was.
Right.
You're in a different situation, and it was so freeing for my wife, to hear something like that. So
Mm-hmm.
hats off to single parents, man.
Yeah, no doubt, brother. No
Yeah,
doubt, no doubt.
yeah,
Because the epidemic or the reality is what I'll call disproportionately high. That's kind of why we want to have these conversations. Because when one is sort of there with the child or multiple children just trying to make it happen, not only is there ensuing frustration and worry and possible stress, and then the inevitable, if the data says two parents provide a more stable home and you're not in that situation, certainly you can make the best of it. But the luggage, the mental luggage that the parent has to associate put upon themselves, hopefully these conversations can be a sounding board or a listening in, right?
yeah,
Because there's sort of philosophical discourse, sometimes we talk about strategies, but ultimately, whether male or female, the single child, particularly boys, are going to need access to other boys, literally, access to other men, literally. And so some of our conversations are about how do you do that, right?
yeah,
If there's not enough or sufficient male presence in your child's life, how do you then connect into programs, resources, organizations, activities, sports that can give them as much counterbalance as they come of age? Absolutely. So would you say you have a fathering style? I haven't read any books that's broken down the different father styles. Well, I guess authoritative, dictative, passive, whatever. But would you say you have a style?
man. I wouldn't say so. It's something I've never thought about. Like what is my fathering style?
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps I do. I just is something I never really thought about. Like what's sort of my style of fathering or parenting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, great question. I think probably the two distinctions that I think about is are you a close on the ground play roughhouse high touch kind of father, right? Or are you kind of a distant surveying father, constantly assuring adherence to house rules and values and those kind of things, right? I think by way of personality, I'm kind of more of a distant father, right? And in part because the high touch, the ground play, the laughter, the giggles, the silliness, the high touch is provided through my wife, right?
Okay.
If you look at how they interact with each other, it's they're just doing their thing, man. It's highly playful. They tease each other, and that's their love expression, whether the sons or the daughters. And so in that being dominant, I just kind of take more of a, okay, let me just make sure the ships are moving. Let me make sure the behavior is where it needs to be. And let me make sure they're kind of growing, you know, characteristically into who my wife and I want them to be. So I would say it's a style that focuses more on maybe problematic behavior and achievement. But I'm able to do that because I have the counterbalance, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is also goes back to the single parent, right? How do you do both?
That's good.
You know, yeah. So I would say, I don't know, maybe it's in my own head, but an observing, authoritative kind of approach. But,
Okay. So you explaining that just those two styles, I'm probably the opposite of you.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm more of the more hands-on, playful, and my wife. And part of it is, I think, just by virtue of my personality, the way I'm wired, and then and my wife is more just by nature serious. And so yeah, I never really thought about that though. That's good. And
But y'all play off of each other, right?
Yeah.
And that's critically important. I also found that because my kids are stair step, they're almost literally within 2 years of each other.
Yeah.
And so they came pretty quick, right? And you know, the nuance of one child is way different than the nuance of 5 children, right? There's the more kids you have is chaos management, right? And then there's okay, let's move, let's get over here, right?
Yeah.
Although there's living in the moment as well. But did you find, because you have 3, so did you find what were some of the differences you observed perhaps when it was just you and the oldest daughter versus now? And because they're all in a pretty high touch age set.
Yeah, like you, man. So 12, 10, and 8. And so I 1 to 2 wasn't that much of a difference. I remember. And they're 18 months apart, our daughters. And so it happened kind of back to back. But I remember when our son came, that was a game changer. And I don't know what about that dynamic made it so made such a big difference, but just the management of everything, right? Trying to coordinate where they have to be, and it just seemed like we were out. I guess we were outnumbered.
You were.
Yeah, we were outnumbered, and so and still are. And so, yeah, I definitely remember a noticeable shift from 2 to 3 kids.
Yeah, it literally went from my wife was working with 2 kids, and that's tense. Both people working, trying to manage 2 little babies. That's tense. And then you're paying the child care. But when the third one came around, we looked at what that bill was. Didn't make no sense.
Yeah.
I don't know your situation, but for about 8 years, wife just kind of went in the house and managed the home and the babies, and that was a blessing, although it was certainly challenging economically, but didn't make any sense because the entire salary
was going to child care. Yeah, man, we experienced that too. So after our first child was born, Haiti, my wife, she stayed home all the way until when our second child was born. She stayed home for a little bit, so that was a couple years, almost 3 years she'd been home. Then she went back to work, and then our son came. Then she stayed home for another couple years. But for you're right, it just didn't make sense. We would have had 3 kids in child care and that bill. But what we realized is that it's some mothers and fathers, right, were made to stay at home and raise the kids at 18, but that wasn't for her, and she was losing her mind after a couple years there, and she go back to work. So
right. Yeah. But it goes to say that you have sort of ideals of fatherhood, right? And those are usually thought of, or parenting, and those are usually thought of in the abstract and very narrowly unique, right? Parent-child, right? Parents-child, right? But when you get into it and then this other life's reality pops in, one has to navigate core parental philosophy or beliefs or ideals. You have to navigate that within living realities, right? And those living realities are salaries, careers, economics, all of those kind of things. And so, parenting is always a stage of compromise. And oftentimes the economic reality in parenting, especially when you have multiple children, those are always compromised as well. So it isn't a blank sheet. Let me just create and parent as I want to. You have to navigate all of these external realities.
Yeah.
Yep. Who would you say influenced your style of parenting?
My parents. My father and mother did. And it's odd, Alonzo, when I, even as a husband, right? When I first got married, the only sort of frame of reference I had was my parents.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went into this thing thinking that, I had to be just like my father was, right? And so, and then even like early on with kids, I'm like, I got to be the father that my father was, because again, I thought he did a phenomenal job. But what I noticed is that even though I was influenced by him, and he had a huge impact on my life, I'm not him, right? And so certain things I can take, from what he did, and certain things, right? The responsibility, providing and things like that. But as far as the way in which he went about things, like I don't have to do it that way. And then that was freeing for me, understanding that I'm my own person,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't have to parent like my father, right? Or be the husband my father was. But does that make sense?
No, it perfectly does. And that's a realization, right? Is, your father is essentially the older version of yourself, aesthetically, DNA wise, right? Especially if you're close. And so there's a natural sense of comparison, right?
Yeah.
Or let me find example in how my dad did things. But, your dad was raised in a different time, right? Your dad was raised in a different era, and children socially operate differently than you. I imagine you were an outdoors baby, to where these babies now are all kind of raised indoors.
Yeah.
And so at some point you have to detach from your old man, right? Because you're fathering in a different reality, right? And then, not to put this upon you, but there's certain things that you probably in retrospect valued and appreciate from your old man. But then there's some things that you were like, love you, Pop, but I'm not gonna replicate that in the new environment. And I think when you can come to that conclusion, that's actually a step into your own full-fledged adulthood, when you can sort of cut the sort of psychological umbilical cord to your own father, while of course maintaining father-son love, generational connection. So no, that makes perfect sense. Do you consult with your pop though at times?
I do. Yeah. Big decisions. Yeah. Stuff about, parenthood, career stuff. Yeah. Still to this day.
Yeah.
I reach out to him and consult with him.
Yeah, my father's also my confidant. We've talked about that before. And major decisions, I'll definitely pick his brain a little bit. And I think that's probably one of the main things that I think is missing for boys who are raised by single mothers is, who's your go-to, right? And we've talked about this before. Every man needs a confidant, someone that they can confide in, someone that doesn't want anything from them, that they can bounce things off of and get genuine feedback and perspective. And so for young men out there, if that's not your father, it needs to be someone of a male stature that you respect and would value their perspective. To that point, Jonathan, I know your dad is your number one, but do you have a community of men that y'all vibe in your own style and way that helps you along this path?
I do, man. I have a few what I call like my inner circle. So it's three guys that I can talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, the embarrassing, the hurtful, that I can share these things with. And so two of them are from college, friends from former teammates, and one is from childhood.
Okay.
Actually, I have two from childhood, and so yeah, man. I didn't always take advantage of that. I didn't always see the value in it. But over the last 10 years or so, I understand just how important it is and how needed it is to have folks like that safe space. And then I have a couple older men too, who are a little farther along the line than me, who I reach out to from time to time, and I feel comfortable being able to share and talk to.
Yeah, no doubt. For those of y'all listening in, appreciate you. But Jonathan has just shared that he has about five people that play a complementary role, a sounding board role, a feedback kind of role. Fatherhood, as we've talked about, can also often feel isolating, right? Mm-hmm. It can feel you get always in a space of management, of home management, but that's not the case. You need sounding boards, you need confidants, and you definitely need communities. And Jonathan has shared with us 3 of his inner circle and some 2 old heads to give him perspective. Jonathan, let me ask kind of one last question of you.
Yep.
And this is like you got a son and you got 2 daughters, right? How do we help guide our seeds to become their authentic self with this caveat, right? When you're introducing your children to co-curricular activities, a lot of times you'll pick things that you either did or things that you didn't do but wanted to do. So you try to manifest your personal dreams, through your children's achievement, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if little man's gonna play football like dad, but and some of that's going to be a reality, right? But how do you kind of get yourself out of the way of who they're supposed to become authentically? How do you navigate that?
Yeah, man. So it's funny you said that, Alonzo. Yesterday, we took our kids to breakfast. They had the day off of school, and at breakfast we were having some conversations. And my wife does this check-in thing where everybody goes around and you name something that's good happening, something that's not going well, and then something you're looking forward to. And so then it was my turn. I went at the end, and this had been on my mind the past couple of weeks, and I just apologized to him, man. I said, I know, sometime I think exactly what I said is I apologize if you guys feel like I'm trying to force certain things on you, particularly sports, right? And some other things, but I was thinking about sports. That's what had really been on my mind. I'm like, listen, and I explained to him, sports was such a huge part of my life growing up. If it wasn't for football, I probably wouldn't have went to college. I wouldn't have met your mom. I appreciate it so much. And so naturally, I want you guys to have experiences like I've had. So sometime I can lose sight of the fact that, y'all got your own path, right? And I said, and sports might not be a part of it in the way it was for me. And I'm okay with that, right? Whatever your path is, whatever God put you on this earth to do, that's what I want you to figure out and do. And so, would it be cool if it's sports? Yes, if that plays a part in it. But if it's not, and I told my son, he's playing his first year of tackle football. I said, man, if you decide you never want to play again, like that's okay, right? Or if you decide you want to take a few years, that he's 8. If you decide you want to come back at 12, that's fine too, man. And so, but it's hard, man. It's easier said than done. But I think the thing that I constantly think about is this is one Bible verse. I think it's in Psalms chapter 136, but it talks about how our book of destiny is written, right? Before we're even born, God has a plan for our life, and each page of it is written out. And so I really believe that, right? It's certain things we're called to do. And so when I think about my kids, I'm like, it's my job as their father is to understand, right, their gifts, their talents, right? Because all those, I believe, are clues to your greater purpose in life, right?
Mm-hmm. Clues, yeah.
They care about the things that they're passionate about. I need to identify them and then steer them in the right direction, help to usher them into their destiny. And so I just got to make sure I don't put the things that I necessarily want them to do in front of what those things are that they should be doing. So I know that's a lot I said there.
No, that's legit. Do you see a little dog in your son?
Alonzo, if he's 8. If he continues on the his path of growth and he develops love for the game, he could do some things with it. That's what I'll say. He could do some things, but
you see some daddy DNA in him.
Yeah, I see so.
My strategy is just what I'll call machine gun exposure, right?
Okay.
Expose them to as much as you can and see what they're drawn to, right? See what they gravitate towards. Now that can be challenging because there's so many co-curricular opportunities, but if I were to laundry list all the things we got ballet, we got opera, we got cello, violin, trumpet, acting, all the sports, but you just kind of machine gun it, see what they gravitate towards, what aligns with their personality, and then you kind of narrow in with that. But I want to close with a strategy. Yes. You mentioned that you and your wife have a ritual. I don't know how frequently you do this, but we do some version of it as well. But it is such a powerful strategy to where you denoise the environment. You put them down, around the dinner table. In this case, y'all were at a restaurant, but you put them through a family exercise that gave them legitimacy in their voice, asked sort of paralleling kinds of questions, and then you did the act of confession, which is a key strategic tool for fathers and mothers, but to confess, right, to share potential error or misjudgment to your children, which counterbalances the natural child authoritative relationship that will sustain itself. But if one can see, oh, my dad can admit perhaps an error of sorts, that teaches me a lesson around perfection or the absence of perfection, right? But back to the strategy. How did that come about? What is it? Why do y'all do that? And what value does this strategy have in terms of y'all's children rearing?
Yeah, man. So the older our kids get, we want to keep those lines of communication open because it's so hard, man. Their schedules are getting busy. You got social media and stuff like that. But my wife and I made a decision within the last year, like we're going to be intentional about making sure that we're communicating with them. And so even though it's busy, man, we still try to have dinner together at least 2 or 3 times a week. We're all sitting down at the dinner table. We have like family time. We got to shift it around. It used to be every Friday night since they were born. We know that that's family time, but now they got practice and stuff. So now it's like Sunday afternoons. But so it really came from just wanting to make sure that we maintain that level of influence that we've had, and that they feel safe, knowing that those lines of communication are open. And it looks different, right? Like that's what it is now, but it may look different 6 months from now. But the main point of it is to maintain that communication. Yeah. And to know where they're right, what's going on in their lives, right? To give that opportunity to share what's going on, in their lives.
Yeah, where their heads are. So what are the 3 questions you guys ask as a family of each other?
Yep. So what's something good going on in your life? What is something that might not be going so good, and then what's something you're looking forward to? And that's kind of how we start, and then it can kind of go in some other directions, but those are the main 3.
Beautiful J4 family. That is a parenting strategy. What's good? Positive. Start off with the positive. It lets them know that they got some good in their life. But good is not always the menu, right? Sometimes there's some frustrations or things that are not where you'd like them to be. And then the babies in their own vocabulary and language style, they'll work through that, right? And then kind of what's looking forward to, right? It talks about the now and then the future. That's an excellent tip. Brother Jonathan, it's been truly a pleasure. Anything else on your spirit as it relates to fatherhood, as it relates to parenting? Anything else you want to kind of close us out with?
Yeah, man. Actually, Alonzo, this is something that's been on my mind the past maybe close to a year, man. I want to see if you have any experience in this or can make any recommendations. So as our kids are getting older, I'm thinking about as they now get ready to transition into sort of like this young adult sort of coming of age.
Mm-hmm.
I know some cultures, right? They have rites of passage, um, uh, sort of celebrations, and not just celebration, but even a process, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and I think something like that is very important. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have it. I don't know anybody who really has, but I've been thinking about it'd be cool, man, as my daughters get to, they're 12 and 10, but maybe 15, 16, man, some sort of, I don't know if it's a program out there that you can do one-on-one with your kid, man, maybe like for, a year or so. And then at the end, we have a celebration where
Mm-hmm.
we honor them coming into womanhood. The same thing for my son. So does that make sense?
No, I mean, it makes perfect sense. And I
Yeah.
think at any point, uh, a parent wanting to have something tangible,
Yeah.
definable that their children can go through, that question comes to their mind. And you're absolutely right. In the cultural evolution of the Black experience, we don't have that built into the culture. In most cases, it's heavily tied into a religiosity.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
see it in the Jewish community. You
Yeah.
also see it with the quinceañera, which is tied to Latina, but it's largely rooted in Catholicism. And so it used, like for example, in the Mormon community, to go on a mission for the boys,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
kind of a rites of passage, but it's typically anchored in something biblical or religious. Culture, as wonderful as that is, doesn't have, at least at this point, the infrastructure and the oversight that does that culturally. Okay. There are programs that exist. They're sort of hit or miss. They certainly haven't grabbed a hold of the national stage, and everyone kind of feeds into it.
Okay.
So two things. It's a gap area. It's a gap area. To your point about, is there something, a curriculum, a strategy, a list of to-dos that an individual family could manage, right? If they got a hold of this literature or whatever it is, that they could then manage that with their children. I've not read that. I think that's a great project and would love to pair up with you on that. Before we talk about that, you did go through a rites of passage. You just do it like most Black males. You do it later. You do it around 18. And in that case, in your case, your rites of passage, assuming you believe something has a beginning, it has a duration that has challenges built into it, and then there's celebration on the back end, and there's generational nuance, meaning there's a leader, upper older person, and then there's a willingness to humble yourself as the person that's in the process, in the beginning of that. Football was that for you. For me, it was a fraternity process, right? The military can provide that for other individuals, but there's sort of few and far in between. And what we end up doing, Jonathan, to your counterpoint, is we grant rights, privileges, and opportunities based upon birthdays. No demonstration of readiness, no demonstration of mastery, just birthdays, right?
Yeah.
You're 16, you can drive the car. You're 17, you can go to the R movie, right? You're 21, you can do ABC. So we do need something that could be managed within families that negates the you got to go here and do this for next season, and they're charging you this amount of money, and you don't quite know the intention or the credibility of the entity. Some would say the Boy Scouts, a national entity, Girl Scouts does that, Jack and Jill does that. But again, those are sort of class nuances. But it's something for the everyday parent to grab a hold of that are recommendations that doesn't exist. And I think it could exist as long as there is an entry point with some celebration to it and some anticipation to it and some generational nuance. Think grandparents, parents, neighbors, nuclear family. There's an articulation of what the expectations are, and some of those are challenging. They're arduous. They have intellectual elements. They have physical elements to it. They're also humbling, where you have to be of service. You have to use your talents to benefit someone beyond yourself, right? And then after milestones have been achieved, you then bring them into whatever it is you want to bring them into, whether it's young adulthood or you have some customization of that into the or realm, whatever.
Right.
You do that with celebration, then it's a form of a rites of passage.
Yeah.
We'd love to work on that with you.
Man, yeah, I think we need to, man.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's, like you said, it's a huge need, and yeah, it's something I've been thinking about. So.
Yeah, but I'll tell you one thing for those listening in, and we truly appreciate it. Give us a subscribe and a like and a share. The fact that you are intentional, you're not just thinking about immediate house management, immediate children management, but that you and your wife are thinking about future, right? Mm-hmm. Just to be in that mindset increases the likeliness of success in terms of who they become in the future. Parenting is very physical. It's very in the moment, right? But as fathers, we got to step back and kind of go on our head and go to our tribe, our village, our community. And we got to think about, okay, my baby is in this phase, transitioning into the next phase. What do I need to be thinking about now so that I can intentionally prepare them and ready them for the next phase to come? And if you do that, with high intentionality, you're preparing for what inevitably is your ultimate charge and responsibility as a father. That is to let them go. Let them go stand on their own 2 feet, skilled, equipped, confident, and ready to assume their own management of their life. You go from high dependence and you're moving them towards independence. Yeah. It looks different for every family, but consistent across all fathers. The responsibility, even more so than mothers, I believe, because mothers will always have a nurturance protection. Fathers got to prepare them to leave, to be on their own, and to be able to handle a life outside the loving, protected nurturance of a parent's home, right? Yeah. And to think intentionally about the phases of that, I think that's probably 85% of the game, brother.
Man, I hope so. I hope so. Hey, do you just made me think of something else. Like I tell him, especially my son, even though he's 8. Have you parented? There's some differences with your sons and daughters, like, and naturally it will be particularly about like I tell my son, like, man, hey, once you're gone, you're not gonna be living on no couch, right? You ain't gonna be living on the couch, or whatever age. And I think sometimes I'm a little more lenient with my daughters. You find that? Have you experienced that?
Oh, hell yeah. You're gonna raise your daughters different than you raise your sons.
Yeah.
And I'm 53. That's my worldview. Although I got much respect for the current literature out there about, the pros and cons of sort of rigid sexual nuance, right? I know we're in a different time, but I raised them from a space of a skill set that I have, right? Yeah. In fact, I'll be very transparent with you, Jonathan. I'm comfortable raising my boys because I myself was once a boy, a child, right? But I was never a female child. I understand when my son comes at me with a certain tone, tenor, need, disposition, I can read it because I'm just simply going back in my mind when I was going through it.
Yeah.
I've discovered that how my sons emit or emote frustration or growth is slightly different than how my daughters have, right? And I can't respond the same way I would to my sons. And then there's nuance within that, as you talked about, right? As I do with my daughters, because they also have nuance. So for me, that's where, my wife's internal interpretation of that, helps me out. So I think it's a reality. I don't think raising your children as cookie cutters is even feasible and doable. You got to have ebb and flow. And within the ebb and flow of personalities, there is a nuance that I think is gender related in terms of how you raise your sons, right?
Yeah.
And then you're raising them for different, I don't know, maybe, you're raising them to what end, right? I have found that I'm not trying to raise them to become something specific, some adjective or some noun. I'm raising them to try to have high confidence. So whatever they do take on, it's of their own choosing, and they'll be successful at it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, perhaps more often than not, I've played into gender stereotypes when raising the kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You talked about, get your kids off the couch, right? As long as there's a plan, right? If your 19-year-old is on your couch, do they have a plan? My 25-year-old, he graduated from college, came back home for a couple of years. His plan was to stack his money,
right,
so that he could pursue an entrepreneurial life, because he is as anti-corporate as anybody I know. And bless his heart, he's able to be anti-corporate because he has no college debt, living in a room. So, there's some luxury to that state.
Yeah.
But he's about to move out with his lady, and they're going to get their own place. But he's doing that with a very substantial savings account.
Yeah.
And so one of the ways to do that is to just put a high value on work.
Mm-hmm.
A high value, when they're 16, and whatever your nuance is, create enthusiasm for them to have their own money. I have found that I could just never give them enough money, so they always wanted other sources of money. And so that motivated them to work. But what it teaches is a culture that is revenue generating mindful. And if they're revenue generating mindful and they like the autonomy that comes from their own checking account, that will motivate them to not be the stereotype of a deadbeat son, living off their mama and daddy on the couch. No, if they're with you, they got to have a plan. And you got to,
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, man. Well, man, I enjoyed it. I do have one last thing I want to share.
Yes, sir.
Man, this was so encouraging, and I've shared it with a lot of fathers and men over the years. But you familiar with Jeffrey Canada?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, man.
So, boys' school.
Jeffrey Canada out there, Harlem Kids Zone. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I was reading something. This was years ago, but he said the purpose of a father is three things, right? To provide, to nurture, and to guide. He says a lot of society places the emphasis on the provide, right? And so, I mean, you look at child support, like you look at like the government gonna make sure you provide, right? And everything around providing, right? And so that's the idea. Society creates this perception that providing is fatherhood, right? And he said, but the other part is nurturing guide. And so a lot of fathers discredit themselves or feel as though they can't even be an adequate father because they're not in a position maybe at the moment where they can provide. And so because successful fatherhood is associated with providing only, and if you feel like you can't do that, a lot of fathers run away, man. And I've seen it with a lot of friends over the years and just folks, man. But Jeffrey said, man, just as important, if not more important, is that nurturing guide. So even if you're not in a position, fathers out there, where you're able to provide like you want to for your children, know that your presence, my dad always said that, as my friends was having kids over the years and stuff, it's not about the presence, but it's about your presence, right? Like make it a point to be in your kid's life, regardless how much money you making, regardless of, your socioeconomic status, where you live, all of that. Just be there, man. And until that providing part can catch up, like the nurturing and the guiding will have a profound impact, on your children. So just wanted to share that.
Jonathan, I'm going to let you have last word on that. That is a wonderful closing statement, man. Provision, guidance, and nurturance, right?
Yep.
Hey, your provision game is where it's going to be, and that'll increasingly grow over time. But, PRESENTS, right? That's provision versus NCE, right? Presence. We can all do that. On that note, Jonathan, thank you so much for spending some time with us on J4. Beautiful folks listening in, thank you so much. Please share this content if you think it has value with a friend. We are in our growth phase. The help we need from you is to help get the word out. You know, I know you got some folks in your life that are raising sons, young people, young sons themselves, who could benefit from some of these perspectives. So please share it with them, subscribe, and help us get the word out. On that note, beautiful J4 family, we'll see y'all later. Coming soon with another J4 combination, and we're going to continue the father-to-father conversations. J. Orr, thank you, brother.
Man, pleasure's all mine. Thank you again for having me.
Yes, sir, man. Yes, sir.
All right.
Raise them beautiful seeds. Hold on.